All right, welcome everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready.
Awesome. So today we're tackling something pretty fundamental. The Bill of Rights.
Ah, the bedrock of American freedoms.
Exactly. But here's the twist. We're going to be using a poem called The 10 That Guard Us All as our guide.
A poem, you say? That's a unique approach.
Right, I thought so too. It's like a mnemonic device, but way more interesting than just memorizing a list.
I'm intrigued. Let's see how this works.
All right, so the first stanza lays it out pretty clearly. The first proclaims, your voice is free, your faith, your press, your right to plea.
Straightforward, right?
Yeah, on the surface,
Yeah.
but packed with some pretty heavy hitters.
Totally. We're talking freedom of religion, speech, the press, assembly, and petition.
Huge. Think about it. The right to speak your mind, practice your faith, a free press holding power to account. It's the foundation of a functioning democracy.
I mean, it's hard to imagine the U.S. without those freedoms.
Right. And the First Amendment's been at the heart of so many landmark cases. Like, take New York Times v. Sullivan, for example. Now, that rings a bell, but refresh my memory.
So it basically set a really high bar for proving libel against public figures, which ended up being a massive win for freedom of the press.
Ah, right. Essentially protecting journalists from frivolous lawsuits, if I remember correctly.
Exactly. But then you have the whole debate raging right now about free speech on social media platforms. It shows you how these principles are constantly being tested and reinterpreted in new contexts.
Yeah, for sure. It's fascinating how a document written centuries ago is still so relevant to the issues we grapple with today.
No doubt. It speaks to the enduring power of these ideas.
Okay, let's move on to the second stanza. It says, the second stands with arms in hand for safety's sake across the land. Now, this one always sparks a lot of discussion, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, it's probably one of the most hotly debated parts of the Constitution.
Yeah, and the poem's imagery, arms in hand, makes me wonder how this right might have been understood back in the 1700s compared to now.
Oh, for sure. The context has changed dramatically. Back then, it was all about ensuring a well-regulated militia to defend the newly formed nation.
Right, they needed to be ready to protect themselves.
Exactly. But over time, the emphasis has shifted, and the debate now often centers on individual gun ownership for self-defense.
And that shift in interpretation has fueled a lot of the legal and political battles we see today.
Definitely. Landmark cases like District of Columbia v. Heller, which upheld an individual's right to own a handgun, have really reshaped the landscape. But the conversation is far from over.
Okay, let's move on to the third stanza. This one feels a bit more straightforward. The third declares, in peace or war, no soldier stays behind your door.
Yeah, no forced quartering of soldiers. It might seem a little less relevant today, thankfully.
Yeah, I can't imagine being forced to house troops in my home.
Right. But it's a reminder that individual liberty and the sanctity of private property are core principles. And you never know, in times of conflict or major emergencies, it could become very relevant again.
It's a good point. You just never know what the future holds. Okay, on to the fourth stanza. The fourth defends your private space, no search or seize without the case. Now, this one feels particularly relevant in our digital age.
Absolutely. The Fourth Amendment, protection from unreasonable searches and seizures, has had to adapt to the times.
Yeah, with our phones and computers, the whole concept of private space has become much more complex.
Totally. Like, think about all the data collected online, GPS tracking, wiretapping. It's raised a lot of legal questions about how the Fourth Amendment applies in a world the Founding Fathers couldn't have envisioned.
I can only imagine the debates surrounding all that. Okay, moving on to the fifth stanza. The fifth ensures the law is just, no self-incriminate, no broken trust. What jumps out at you about this one?
Well, the Fifth Amendment covers a lot of ground. You got the right to due process, protection against double jeopardy, and of course the right against self-incrimination.
Right, the famous pleading the fifth.
Exactly. And the concept of due process, it's fundamental. It means the government can't just take away your life, liberty, or property without following proper legal procedures.
Makes sense. Everyone deserves a fair chance to defend themselves.
Absolutely. And it's led to some really important legal protections, like the Miranda rights, which came out of a Fifth Amendment.
Oh, right. The right to remain silent, the right to an attorney. I never made that connection before.
See? This poem is connecting all the dots.
All right, on to the sixth stanza. The sixth demands a trial be fair, with speed, a jury, and counsel's care. This one seems crucial to ensuring a just legal system.
Absolutely. The Sixth Amendment guarantees the right to a speedy and public trial, an impartial jury, and the right to legal counsel. These are safeguards to prevent wrongful convictions and ensure everyone has a fair shot at justice.
It's like each of these amendments builds upon the others, creating a whole system of protection.
And they've been tested time and again. Like, take the case of Gideon v. Wainwright. It established the right to an attorney even if you can't afford one.
Wow, a landmark case for sure. All right, we're making progress. The Seventh Amendment is up next. The seventh calls for civil fight, a jury's voice to set it right. So this one's all about civil cases, right?
Right. It guarantees the right to a jury trial in civil cases. So even in disputes between individuals like breaches of contract or personal injury lawsuits, a jury gets to decide the outcome.
I never really thought about it that way. So it's like it ensures that regular people, not just judges, have a say in legal matters.
Exactly. It brings in that element of community involvement, preventing any one person from having too much power.
Interesting. Okay, on to the eighth stanza. The eighth forbids excess and pain. No cruel fines or punishments reign. This seems pretty self-explanatory, but I imagine it's still been the subject of debate.
Oh, you bet. The Eighth Amendment, prohibiting excessive bail and cruel and unusual punishment, is at the heart of so many legal and ethical debates.
Yeah, I mean, what constitutes cruel and unusual is going to vary depending on the time and the context.
Exactly. It's been at the center of arguments over things like the death penalty and conditions in prisons. Landmark cases like Furman v. Georgia, which briefly halted capital punishment in the U.S., highlight how complex this amendment is.
Wow, it really shows how these few words can spark so much debate and legal wrangling. Okay, almost there. The ninth stanza says, "The ninth reminds, though some are penned, your other rights do not end." Now, this one feels a bit more abstract.
It is, for sure. It's basically saying, hey, just because we listed some rights here doesn't mean those are the only ones you have.
Ah, okay, so it's like a catch-all.
Exactly. The Ninth Amendment acknowledges that people have rights beyond those specifically listed in the Constitution. It's often called the Unenumerated Rights Amendment.
So it leaves room for interpretation and protects rights that maybe weren't even on the radar back then.
Precisely. It's been crucial in protecting things like the right to privacy, which isn't explicitly mentioned in the Constitution.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And finally, we reach the 10th stanza. The 10th concludes with power clear. What's not in federal hands is near. This one seems to be all about the balance of power.
You got it. The 10th Amendment reinforces the principle of federalism. Basically, any powers that aren't specifically given to the federal government are reserved for the states or the people.
So it's like drawing a line in the sand, saying the federal government shouldn't overreach.
Exactly. And this has been a source of tension throughout U.S. history, with debates about states' rights versus federal authority constantly popping up.
Man, it's amazing how this poem, The 10 That Guard Us All, has not only helped us break down these amendments, but has also sparked so many new thoughts and questions.
I'm with you there. It's made me realize how dynamic and complex the Bill of Rights really is.
It's not just a historical document. It's a living, breathing set of principles that we're still figuring out how to apply in our ever-changing world.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it so fascinating. Like, take free speech in the age of social media or privacy rights in the digital age. These are all issues we're grappling with today, and they all stem from the Bill of Rights.
It makes you wonder how we'll continue to interpret and apply these rights in the future with all the technological and societal changes happening around us. It's a big question, and one that I think deserves a lot more thought and discussion.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
A deep dive indeed.
Thanks for joining me on this journey through the Bill of Rights. And for everyone listening, keep those brains buzzing, keep asking questions, and keep exploring.
And keep those freedoms close.
Until next time.